The basketball's frantic slam against fractured asphalt thundered like a beast clawing for breath. But when Nick's venom erupted, "Get your filthy black asses off our court, you gutter trash." The world imploded, a poison-laced harpoon tearing through the humid summer dusk. Tyrell, 14, stood rooted mid-dribble, sweat carving rivers down his face, his midnight eyes flaring with a defiance he fought to bury deep. Nick's white posse unleashed a torrent of guttural cackles, each snicker a jackhammer shattering his pride, and in that gut-wrenching heartbeat, the court shed its playground skin. It became a crucible of fire and blood. Tyrell's chest pounded, a primal war drum shrieking he couldn't bolt. Not now, not with their taunts gouging his soul like rusted blades. The public court squatted on West Side's jagged fringe, a scarred slab of concrete hemmed by sagging chain link and weathered benches, where crumbling shacks jostled glossy condos. Each summer evening, it roared with raw vitality, sneakers squealing, shouts ricocheting off peeling murals, a gritty hymn of rebellion and fleeting dreams. For Tyrell, it was a cathedral of asphalt, a bulwark against the suffocating two-room flat he shared with his mom and little sister, Lena, a shield from the hood's cold, probing glares that shadowed his every step. He was a street ball virtuoso, swift as a specter, and today he'd planted his flag early with his crew. Darius, a wiry firecracker with a grin sharp enough to slice steel, and Jamal, a lumbering teddy bear whose booming laugh masked a tender core. They were locked in a pickup duel, the ball slicing tight parabolas through the air when 5 white teens swaggered in from across the street. Nick Spear headed the charge, 15, brown hair flopping over a predatory eye, his strut a neon banner of unchecked dominion. Eddie shadowed him, a scrawny loudmouth chomping gum like a machine gun, while Chris loomed, a freckled juggernaut with fists primed to smash. Sean and Matt flanked the rear, silent as vultures, their glares honed like switchblades as they clocked Tyrell's squad. "This is our court," Nick hissed, his voice a Molotov of scorn and menace, hands cocked on hips. "Don't care if you beat us here, get lost." Tyrell killed the dribble, rising tall, breath thick but voice forged iron. "Public turf. We're here, we ball. That's the code." Eddie hawked his gum onto the blacktop, sneering. "Code? You black leeches just squat where you don't belong. Beat it before we crush you." Darius snarled low, knuckles whitening, but Jamal yanked him back, his whisper a plea. "Chill, bro, no chaos." Tyrell stood firm, blood simmering beneath his skin. His mom's gospel told in his skull. Don't sink to their slime. He sucked in a jagged breath, pinning Nick's stare. One game. Winners claim the turf. Square. Nick's smirk coiled, a viper savoring prey. He scanned his crew, then nodded. "Sure. You want to get torched quick? I'll play your little game." The showdown blazed under a merciless sun, its crimson glare scorching rooftops like a referee's unyielding vigil. Tyrell quarterbacked his trio, himself, Darius, Jamal, against Nick, Eddie, and Chris, with Sean and Matt slouched on the sidelines as self-anointed arbiters. The air pulsed with street ball's feral rhythm, rubber hammering pavement, sneakers shrieking, ragged gasps threading a taut, electric score. Tyrell danced like quicksilver, dodging Eddie's flailing swipe, zipping the ball to Darius, who drilled the opener with a silken jumper. A ragtag crowd trickled in, neighborhood urchins, stray grown-ups, cheering in jagged bursts, their loyalties a murky stew. Nick bared teeth, snatching the rock from Jamal's fumbling paws, but Tyrell swooped, spun, and sank a two-pointer dead in Nick's smug grill. The tally skewed, 6-2, and Nick's grin curdled into a snarl. Then the game turned sinister. Mid-scramble, Nick rammed his elbow into Tyrell's ribs, a cheap shot that rocked him. "That your hustle, punk?" Tyrell hissed, lungs aflame, but Nick just shrugged, leering. "Your weak-ass game, your bruises." His posse howled, and Tyrell felt a volcano ignite. Not just fury, but a raw, ancestral scar, weeping fresh. Next drive, as Tyrell stormed the hoop, Nick struck again, a blatant shove hurling him to the deck. His knee smashed asphalt, a crimson gash splitting wide, and the crowd gasped, then fractured, half hooting Nick's name, half roaring foul. Darius bolted to help, but Tyrell swatted him off, staggering up, his glare a molten lance piercing Nick's skull. "Done yet, black boy?" Nick taunted, twirling the ball with a sneer. "You lot never know when to crawl back to your holes." Tyrell's jaw locked, blood snaking down his shin, soaking his sock scarlet. He didn't speak, couldn't. Words were chains he'd never wear. He snatched the rock, flicked it to Jamal, and hobbled back in. Each step knifed his knee, each breath clawed his throat, but he surged on. This wasn't hoops, it was a howl against their venom, a vow etched in sweat and blood. The grind stretched 10 more punishing minutes, the score teetering at 18-16, Tyrell's crew clinging to the precipice. The crowd swelled, a raucous chorus reverberating through the hood like a street opera. Tyrell, paying a shrieking specter, piloted his team with surgical grit, every move a thunderous vow. "I'm beyond your filth." Nick, rabid as a corner dog, wouldn't buckle. In the clutch play, as Tyrell bolted for the kill shot, Nick charged shoulder first, no pretense of chasing the ball, just pure malice. Tyrell crashed hard, the rock skittering free, and the crowd's roar spiked like a thunderclap splitting the sky. Jamal erupted, "That's fucking cheating," and rammed Nick with a linebacker's fury. Eddie pounced, clawing Jamal's shirt, and chaos swallowed the court. A melee shredding all semblance of reason. Tyrell lurched up, ripping Eddie off his friend, but Chris plowed him down again, guffawing like a hyena. "These punks fold fast, Nick." Madness reigned. Kids shrieking, adults shoving through, a snarl of fists and swears drowning the dusk. Tyrell sprawled on the blacktop, knee a furnace of agony, palms scraped raw, breath a choked sob. Nick loomed, smirking like a jackal over carrion, and despair clawed Tyrell's guts like talons. "They want to erase me," he thought, a tidal wave of futility crashing over him. "They've always wanted that." Then thunderous boots sliced through the chaos. Mr. James, his old elementary coach, a white colossus with silver hair and a voice like a cannon barreling through a storm. "Enough," Mr. James roared, storming the fray with the force of a freight train. He jabbed a gnarled finger at Nick, his eyes blazing with righteous scorn. "This your ball game, you little shit?" Smashing kids into the dirt, cackling like a hyena. "You're a spineless thug, not a damn player." Nick gaped, jaw slack, his crew struck dumb as statues. Mr. James pivoted to Tyrell, hoisting him up with hands like steel cables, his iron gaze melting into something warm, almost fatherly. "Stand tall, son. You danced rings around these fools. Pure poetry on this court." But the fracture wasn't just with Nick's crew. It cut deeper, into his own. Jamal, shirt shredded, glared at Tyrell, his voice a smoldering ember searing the air. "Why'd you push it, man? We could have bounced. Left this crap behind." Darius nodded, his eyes flinty with accusation, his usual grin replaced by a grimace. "They ain't worth this blood, Ty. You dragged us into a damn war." Tyrell's chest seized, a vice of betrayal squeezing his ribs, his brothers turning on him when he needed them most. "You don't get it," he rasped, his voice cracking like brittle glass. "They'd never stop if I caved. They'd own us, forever." Jamal kicked the dirt, muttering, "Ain't worth it," but Darius just stared, his silence heavier than words, a wall Tyrell couldn't scale. Tyrell rose, his knee a bloody ruin, the asphalt painted with streaks of his defiance, but the pain bowed to a wildfire of pride roaring through his veins. Mr. James turned on Nick's gang, his voice a serrated blade slicing through their bravado. "Game's done, you punks. They own this turf. And next time, bring some damn skill instead of your whining, punk-ass mouths." Nick muttered something unintelligible, his gaze skittering away like a scolded dog's, his swagger reduced to ash. Eddie and Chris hauled him off, the pack slinking into the deepening dusk, their retreat a faint whimper swallowed by the cooling breeze. The crowd thinned, some thumping Tyrell's back with gruff nods. kids whispering tales of legend in odd tones. Darius forced a grin, slugging his arm weakly. "You're unreal, Ty. Straight up beast mode." But Tyrell's soul was a maelstrom, triumph clashing with a gnawing, hollow ache that wouldn't relent. He sank onto the splintered bench beside the court, staring at his ravaged knee, Nick's slur looping in his mind like a relentless taunt. "You lot never know your place." He saw Grandpa, his weathered voice recounting tales of being beaten from parks by white fists decades ago, Mom scrubbing diner floors passed on to keep them fed, her hands raw but unbowed. They didn't just want the court, he realized, the truth a millstone dragging his spirit down. They wanted me erased from it, erased from everything. Mr. James sat beside him, a stoic sentinel weathered by years, then spoke, his voice rough but steady. "You don't owe them a damn thing, Tyrell. Not proof, not a fight, nothing. But you gave it anyway, and you gave it fierce as hell." Tyrell met his eyes, his vision smearing, sweat mingling with tears he couldn't parse, wouldn't admit. "They won't shift, will they?" His voice splintered, a boy's plea piercing through the warrior's shell he'd built to survive. Mr. James sighed, a heavy gust of weariness, clapping his shoulder with a hand that felt like an anchor. "Some won't, too dug into their hate. But you rewrote their lens today, kid. That's a spark, a damn good one." Then Darius bolted up, his breath ragged, eyes wide with panic. "Nick's crew's doubling back, Ty. They're pissed, hollering about jumping us by the alley. I saw him with sticks and shit." Tyrell's gut plummeted, dread surging like ice through his veins. "They'll end me." He stood, wincing as his knee buckled, but Mr. James gripped his arm, steady as stone. "Hold tight, son. I've got this handled." Inside, Tyrell's mind was a storm-tossed sea. "I won the court but lost my peace. What's left?" He saw his sister Lena's face, her gap-toothed giggle when he'd promised her ice cream tomorrow after Mom's shift. What if I don't make it home to her? The thought was a dagger twisting deeper than Nick's blows, sharper than the pain in his leg. Dusk thickened into a heavy shroud, streetlights flickering on with a faint buzz, casting long, jagged shadows across the court. Tyrell, Darius, and Jamal clustered by the bench, nerves taut as bowstrings stretched to snapping. When Nick's gang slunk from the alley, 5 silhouettes emerging like wraiths. Nick brandishing a thick stick, Eddie cracking his knuckles with a manic grin, their eyes glinting with feral intent. "Think you're king now, huh?" Nick sneered, closing the gap with predatory strides. "We'll bury you right here, punk, teach you where you belong." Tyrell's heart jackhammered, terror and fury waltzing a brutal dance in his chest. "They'll kill me this time. Snap me like a twig." He braced, fists balled tight, his knees screaming in protest. But Mr. James stepped forward, a granite wall of resolve towering between them. "Back off, you little shits, or I dial 911, and I've got a dozen witnesses ready to sing." Nick wavered, the stick dipping slightly in his grip, but Eddie lunged, swinging wild at Jamal with a feral snarl. Tyrell dove in, shoving Eddie back with a surge of adrenaline, agony blasting through his leg like a gunshot. Chaos erupted. Chris tackled Darius with a linebacker's force. Sean snagged Tyrell's shirt, yanking hard, but a shrill, piercing cry cleaved the night like a thunderbolt. "Stop it right now." Mrs. Carter, Tyrell's mom, charged onto the scene, her diner apron flapping from her double shift, her eyes a wildfire of maternal wrath blazing through the dark. She'd heard the uproar from 3 blocks off, her feet pounding the pavement like a warrior racing to defend her blood. "Get your damn hands off my son," she thundered, wrenching Sean off Tyrell with a strength born of desperation and love. Nick's crew froze, her fury a sledgehammer smashing through their bravado. Mr. James barked, "Scatter, you punks, or you're toast." And Mrs. Carter's glare, molten steel forged in a mother's fire, sealed their fate. Nick dropped the stick with a clatter, mumbling, "Screw this," and they bolted, their shadows swallowed by the night's gaping maw. Tyrell crumpled to the ground, his chest heaving like a bellows, Mom dropping beside him, her hands trembling as she cupped his sweat-slick face. "You whole, baby?" Her voice cracked, terror bleeding through the steel she'd armored herself with, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. He nodded, his throat a knot of raw emotion. "Yeah, Ma, I'm here, I'm still here." Jamal, panting hard, his shirt in tatters, muttered, "Sorry, Ty. I lost it back there." Darius nodded, his guilt a heavy shroud in his eyes. "We're solid now, man. I swear." Mrs. Carter pulled Tyrell into her arms, her breath ragged against his ear, her grip fierce, as if she could shield him from the world itself. "You're my whole damn world. You hear me? Don't you ever scare me like that again. I can't lose you, Ty." Night draped the hood in an inky cloak, but the tale twisted into darker, uncharted depths. The next evening, Tyrell limped home alone through the quiet streets, his knee bandaged but throbbing, his mind a snarl of pride and creeping dread, when a lean figure peeled from an alley shadow. Rico, 17, a wiry black teen with a rep for dancing on the edge of law and chaos, his eyes glinting like honed steel under the streetlight's flicker. "Heard you smoked Nick's punks," he said, his voice low and edged, a blade wrapped in velvet. "They're hunting you now, lil man. Word on the block is they want your blood, and they ain't playing." Tyrell's pulse spiked, ice flooding his veins like a winter tide. "I didn't sign up for no war, Rico." Rico smirked, pulling a switchblade from his pocket, its steel snagging the streetlight in a cold, wicked gleam. "Don't matter what you sign, kid. You're marked, a target now. Take this, or you're meat for their grinder." Tyrell stared at the blade, his hands trembling as if it burned to touch. A knife? His mom's face flashed through his mind, her tears streaking her cheeks, her fight tearing through the night. "I don't roll like that," he croaked, stepping back, his voice a hoarse whisper against the rising panic. "I'll face it my way clean." Rico shrugged, pocketing the blade with a nonchalant flick. "You're grave, lil homie. They'll gut you like a fish. Mark my words." That night, Tyrell sat awake in his cramped room, Rico's warning a specter haunting the shadows. They won't quit, never will. He saw blood, not just the stain on his knee, but his own, pooling on the blacktop, his lifeless body sprawled under a street lamp. He clutched his basketball, its worn leather a lifeline tethering him to sanity, whispering to himself, "I ain't them. I can't be them." But the dark pressed in like a shroud, and he wondered, his breath shallow, am I enough to outlast this? The next morning, whispers slithered through the block like smoke. Nick's older cousin, Trent, 19, a tatted bruiser with a wrapped sheet, was prowling the streets, vowing payback for his kin. Tyrell's stomach churned, a sour knot of dread tightening. It's not just Nick now, it's a damn blood feud. 2 days later, Tyrell trudged to the corner store for milk, his knees stiff as a board, his spirit frayed to threads, when a hulking shadow loomed across his path. Trent, massive in a tank top, tattoos snaking up his arms like black vines, his eyes cold and dead as a shark's. "You the punk who fucked with my cousin?" he growled, stepping close, his breath sour with cheap beer and menace. Tyrell's heart slammed against his ribs, fear of vice choking his throat. "I didn't start nothing. He came at me first." Trent smirked, cracking his neck with a sickening pop. "Don't give a shit who started it, kid. You're done, finished." He shoved Tyrell hard against the brick wall, pinning him there, a meaty fist hovering inches from his face, when a voice cut through the haze. Darius, sprinting up with wild eyes, phone clutched in his hand. "Back off, asshole. I'm live streaming this right now. Whole block's watching." Trent froze, his glare darting to the phone, then spat on the pavement with a wet splat. "This ain't over, punk. I'll find you." He lumbered off, his bulk vanishing around the corner, but Tyrell's legs buckled, collapsing against the wall as Darius caught him, steadying him with a fierce grip. "You good, Ty? You still with me?" "No," Tyrell whispered, his voice a shard of glass splintering in the air. "I'm tired, D. Tired of proving I belong here, tired of fighting just to breathe." His eyes burned, hot tears spilling despite his clenched fists, the weight of it all crashing down like a collapsing roof. Darius pulled him into a rough, desperate hug, his voice fierce against Tyrell's ear. "You don't gotta prove shit to them, man. Not a damn thing. You're us, our brother. That's enough." Tyrell clung to him, the tears soaking into Darius's shirt, a silent sob shaking his frame. I just want to go home, he thought, the longing a jagged ache. Home to Ma, to Lena, somewhere safe. That night, the hood buzzed with tension, rumors swirling like smoke through the streets. Tyrell sat on his stoop, the basketball idol in his lap, when a new figure approached. Keisha, 16, a fierce black girl from down the block, her braids swinging as she strode up, her eyes sharp with purpose. She was known for scrapping with anyone who crossed her crew, a wildfire in human form. Heard about Trent, she said, voice low and steady. He's rounding up muscle, planning something big. You need backup, Ty. Tyrell's throat tightened, exhaustion warring with a flicker of hope. I don't want more fighting, Kuish. I'm done. She crouched beside him, her gaze piercing. Ain't about wanting, it's about surviving. They won't stop till you're down for good. Me and my girls will watch your back. You ain't alone in this. He stared at her, the offer a lifeline he hadn't expected. Why? You don't even know me like that. Keisha smirked, a glint of steel in her grin. I know you're one of us, stood up when it mattered. That's family enough for me. Her words sank in, a fragile warmth piercing the cold dread that had gripped him since Rico's visit. Family. He nodded, faint but resolute. All right. Thanks, Kuish. Days bled into a tense haze. The hood alive with Tyrell's saga, his stand against Nick, his mom's wrath tearing through the night, Rico's chilling offer, Trent's looming threat, Keisha's unexpected allegiance. A week later, Tyrell hobbled back to the court, his knee braced with a makeshift wrap, his spirit scarred but unbowed. New faces trickled in. Not Nick's crew, not Trent's goons, but strangers drawn by the whispers. A freckled white kid, his voice quaking with nerves, stepped up. That spin move you pulled. Can you teach me? Tyrell grinned, a flicker of light breaking through his storm, and tossed the ball. A game flared to life, no borders, no venom, just the pure, untainted rhythm of the bounce. Nick and Trent stayed shadows, their presence a cold echo lurking beyond the court's edge, but Tyrell felt their weight. Rico's warning, Keisha's vigilance, a constant hum of peril. It didn't break him. Each dribble sang Mr. James's truth. You rewrote their lens. Each swish summoned Grandpa's scars etched by decades of hate. Mom's fire blazing through the dark, Keisha's steel at his side, his own unyielding core, a chain forged in blood and grit, unbreakable.